It's the Tiny and Nate Show. I'm Tiny.
And I'm Nate, here to help you create time and money freedom through real estate investing,
so that you can live a life full of impact and joy.
All right. I'm super excited for my guest today. His name is Dane Larsen. Let me bring him in here. Dane, welcome to the Tiny and Nate podcast. How you doing?
Thank you, Nate. Great to be here. I'm doing awesome.
So we're sitting there having our Thai food the other day, and I'm thinking, here's a 20-something-year-old young man who is getting into real estate through house hacking. I just had to have you on the show just to share your story of how you're getting started. I think there's probably a lot of people out there who think, oh yeah, I've heard about real estate investing, I should probably get into that, but it can be really intimidating. Or maybe they're like middle-aged like me, 40-year-old somethings, and thinking, man, I wish I'd done that back when I was 20. And so I just wanted to inspire people with what you're doing, what you're about, with what you're learning. So let me just start with this. What is house hacking?
Yeah, house hacking is a multitude of things. I mean, it could be from buying a small multifamily complex, which is less than 4 units, renting out the other units, living in one unit, and then just having the cash flow cover your mortgage. Or you go out at a different route. Mine was buying a single family home and then renting out the bedrooms to roommates. So individuals that I know or others that are just simply the traditional marketing, Craigslist, Facebook, that sort of thing.
Right. So take me back then. What was the moment that you got in your head this crazy idea that I should house hack? I should house hack. Did you read something? Did you listen to something? How'd you get the idea?
Bigger Pockets. Bigger Pockets is where I found house hacking. I think it was a single episode back in the earlier times where they brought up that concept.
Yeah.
House hacking is a great way to start. It's a low risk because you're living in the property. You can make mistakes and see them more quickly versus making the mistake and then not finding out for months down the road where it starts to affect your bottom line. You see it in the moment. And that's really where I found house hacking to begin with.
Okay. So some Bigger Pockets episode. So when you say maybe that's, I think this would be true, that it's easier to get into than say buying an apartment building or something like that. What are the benefits of starting with house hacking from a financial perspective? I know you know a little bit about mortgage and whatnot. So what are the benefits since you're going to live in it? Does that mean that you can get cheaper rates on the mortgage?
Yes. So with house hacking, you get a multitude of options with financing. Of course, you can have the more creative routes with seller financing or lease options, but I went the traditional route and went with your typical bank mortgage. The first time home buyer program allowed me to put as little as 3% down. I went to go with 5% because of the private mortgage insurance was a lot more reduced at the 5% mark, and it allowed me to cash flow a little bit more, and I still had the reserves that I needed to feel comfortable in case something happened later on down the road.
Okay, so take us through the whole story. So you were listening to Bigger Pockets. How did you find the deal? How'd you finance it? How'd you find the roommates? And then break down the numbers for us. Just kind of take us through the whole thing here.
Yeah, this first house was about a 2.5 year process. So it did not happen overnight. I didn't just wake up in the morning and said, "Hey, I'm buying a house and throwing roommates in it and I'm cash flowing." It started out with a lot of analysis paralysis for that first year. That was just getting over mindset hurdles of, can I afford this? Is this really something I should do? Is it a risk that I need to take? And that last year was where I really started to buckle down on my marketing. So I was doing direct mail, going straight to sellers, reaching out to various realtors in the industry, introducing myself as someone looking to purchase a home. I made multiple offers, had multiple no's, multiple people yell at me over the phone, cold calls, that sort of thing. It wasn't until last fall where this property came on the market, and I had built criteria in an Excel spreadsheet stating purchase prices for each home and then the number of bedrooms it would have to have in order for me to cash flow. So I knew exactly what my criteria was. So this home hit the market, and the next day I was viewing it and put in an offer the same day that I had viewed it. That was full price, competitive. I was able to actually negotiate the sellers to carry closing costs, which in this market seems absolutely crazy, but it allowed me to fully leverage the property and get the most cash on cash return for it.
Very cool. So I think it's interesting to note that you were doing direct to seller marketing
Mhm.
with some cold calling and cards, but in the end, your first house hack was actually on market with an agent.
It was, and that's one thing that people say you can't find deals on the MLS, but really you just need to have you have to have your 3 or 4 buckets of marketing that you hit every time and be consistent with all of them because you don't really know where that deal is gonna pop up. There were a couple that coulda worked in the off-market side that just didn't end up working, but if I would've just completely blocked off the MLS and just in my mind said, "No, that's not an option," then I would have missed out on this property and who knows what other ones down the road.
Absolutely. And I heard something else in there that's worth pointing out, which is that you got very clear on what it was you were trying to buy. So how many bedrooms did you need? Do you remember? What was the buy box bedroom count?
It was actually the bathrooms.
Oh, bathrooms. Okay.
So the bathrooms are the biggest part of house hacking because you have to share them. So properties that have maybe 2 bathrooms didn't really pencil out to where I could justify the amount of rent I could charge for it versus a house that has 1 bed to 1 bath count. So people can have some privacy there. And for my numbers, it was roughly 3 bathrooms and 4 bedrooms is right around where the numbers began to pencil out. And then it was case by case on the deal from there where I would run it through my spreadsheet and my numbers to see if that truly was a deal.
Okay. Got it. So three bath, four bed was
Mhm.
your kind of basic buy box. And so when you ran it through, how did you know this one was going to be a deal?
I knew this one was going to be a deal because there was some value add in it. So one of the quote unquote living rooms or living spaces could be turned into a bedroom, which I did. Blew out a couple of walls, got my drywalling skills honed, and built a closet,
Nice.
framed in a door, and created a bedroom with the proper egress and windows and all that good stuff. So that was a great value add that added another bedroom, and then it was paired with a bathroom downstairs. Um, and then the parking was another big thing that I could sell on. So the property had 3 garages and I was able to charge extra for each garage. That was another
Ah,
creative strategy I used. And then it also
yeah.
had 4 we were able to get 4 off-street parking spaces.
Okay.
So which is another point with house hacking that you don't really consider with a traditional rental is parking. Parking's huge because if you can't park with the tenants in a reasonable space that meets city code and doesn't annoy the neighbors, then it's not a deal that's going to be working out.
Okay, so break it down. The total number of bedrooms that you had by the time you were done doing that value add building that, was it 4 or was it 5?
So I bought the property with 5 bedrooms. It was five.
Ah,
It was a 5 bed, 4 bath, and then it
got
turned
it.
into a 6 bed, 4 bath.
Got it. With 3 garages. So some of the
Hmm.
renters could pay a little extra to have their own garage?
Exactly. They have their own garage space. Half the space is theirs, and then there's one that's a separate space, which is completely private to that individual.
Okay, so before we have you break down the numbers, I'm curious, how the heck did you fill the place up?
Filled the place up. The first 6 individuals were people that I grew up with that are still
Nice.
professionals in the area and students finishing up school, and
Right.
as well as my younger brother. So we filled it that way. And then this last bedroom, I've been able to rent out via Facebook Marketplace.
Perfect. Okay, perfect. All right, so break the numbers down for us. What was the buy price? What was the percent down? And then what's your monthly mortgage? And what's the cash flow from the gross rents?
Yeah. So purchase price was asking at 685,000. I
Hmm.
put down 5% of that. I was roughly 32,000 into the deal up front, and then I did some updating when we moved in. That was the bedroom that we just spoken about. I put a fresh new paint coat on there. All in the, I was roughly into it 40,000, all said and done. The mortgage payment is just over 3,500, and the current gross rent that I'm getting is $4,650.
Nice. Very good. Very good. So somebody probably could look at this and go, what the heck? You have no place as a 20 something buying a $600,000 house. I mean, you should save those for the old people, the rich people, depending on the county you're in. But so you mentioned earlier that there was some mindset hurdles that you had to get over. I'm curious what those were, and how did you not get freaked out spending over $500,000 on your first house?
Closed my eyes and pulled the trigger. That's what it
There you
boiled
go.
down to. No, it man, I would say the biggest mindset for me and the biggest growth spot was going to sellers as a 23-year-old and saying, "Hey, I want to buy your property,"
Right.
and trying to sell myself in that sense. Um, but it was just truly believing. The numbers penciled out. I had the cash in my savings account from being
Mhm.
frugal over the years. I had my reserves, so if something did happen, then I knew I could cover it, and I had
Mhm.
the amount
Yep.
of rent for 6 months or the amount of mortgage
Yep.
payments for 6 months. So
Right.
I felt comfortable that there's no way that I wouldn't be able to rent this thing in a 6 month period. So it was just really making sure I felt comfortable with it and going through worst case scenario, best case scenario, the scenarios in between, and just seeing, yes, this truly is something that could happen. And worst worst comes to worst, I have friends and family that I can fall back on in case this falls through.
Right, right.
Mhm.
So I'm really curious what your hope is. First of all, how does it feel to have other people pay for your housing each month?
It's different. It feels bizarre. I think the biggest thing for me, honestly, was tax season. You always hear about depreciation and such, and it was the first time that I was able to see my tax bill get cut in half due to property depreciation and being able to depreciate 90 some odd percent of this property, except for my bedroom, of course.
Right, right, right. So your roommates are paying for your mortgage payment. So I mean, before that, were you paying rent as a student, or do you remember what your rent payment was before you got into this house?
It was both. So in college, I was living in Bellevue and I was
Yeah,
split in a three-bedroom house, and my
yeah,
rent payment was roughly $850 a month.
yeah, yeah.
So, I mean, that's a huge swing and that was 3 years ago now. So, I have no idea
Right,
what it is. I mean, with how much rents have increased, especially in that area of Bellevue, I can't imagine what that rent is at this time.
right. Yeah, probably at least 11, 12, 13, 14, maybe even.
I don't want to know. I feel bad for
Yeah.
those kids having to go to school down there and pay that.
Exactly. So you went from paying 800 bucks a month, or today's probably equivalent of around 1,500 bucks a month, to bringing in about a grand a month in cash flow for your living expenses.
Right. And then that isn't quite net. So
Yeah.
convenience is a big thing as well with house
Yeah.
hacking. I think that creating a product that is desirable in the market and putting something out there to help people is something that is needed. So I charge a flat rent. They don't have to pay for utilities. It's all covered. So I make sure to account for that in the rent charges as well as supplies. So I supply basic need stuff, toilet paper, um, paper towels, Ziploc bags, hand sanitizer, hand soap, all that good stuff. So I'm
Yeah.
constantly restocking that, as well as we have a house cleaner that comes in biweekly. So she will come in and clean out the whole house, top to bottom, make sure it's nice and clean so we don't have any arguments over who's going to be cleaning what or whose turn it is, or me getting stuck with it on my weekend and taking up that time. So it's all a good value add, and it helps everyone out in the long end of things.
Well, and doesn't it sort of make this more like a business for you rather than just a really difficult side hustle, right? Because then the thing kind of runs. I granted you probably are still running to grab the TP and whatnot, but you got to grab TP for yourself anyhow, right? So,
Right.
but by having the house cleaner in there, it's kind of like having a property manager in a sense. You're still managing the property, getting rents and whatnot. Are there any other tricks you're using to make it as frictionless as possible for yourself, like collect the ways you collect rent or anything else?
I've kept everything's electronic for me, so I don't want any
Yeah,
checks. I don't want any cash, none of that.
yeah,
So Venmo
yeah,
me. bank transfer. I'll give you all the account information. I'll help you out with that. That's the easiest way for me that I found out to collect rent. And nowadays, with the millennial age, Venmo is very popular, thankfully. So it's very easy to collect a rent. It's just the typical schedule: due on the first, late by the fifth. The only other thing is yard care. We'll have that coming up here soon. So we'll have a maintenance worker working outside to maintain the yard and all that good stuff.
So here's what I want to know. I want to know why you did this from the perspective of, like, do you have some sort of grand vision for being financially independent by a certain age? What's driving you to take the time and energy to learn this and do this and achieve this?
hmm This first property is the best education I've ever gotten, I would say, and that was the goal of it. So it was to be able to learn the basics of a rental, buying the property, going through the process from start to finish, low risk, as we discussed earlier. The grand vision, I would say, is a 30 by 30 for me. I want to have 30 doors by the age of 30. I think that would put me in a good place to be able to um, not quit the day job, but be able to take those getaways, those extended getaways, or focus on different business ventures, whatever that may be. And this property is a great start because it eliminates the largest expense for any American, and that's your housing expense. So it takes care of the housing expense, provides a little bit of cash flow, and it frees up my time to do stuff that matters to me.
Love that. Love that, Dane. Very cool. So at age 23, you buy your first house, you turn a 4-bed into a 5-bed,
5 to 6.
5-bed into a 6-bed.
Yep.
You fill it up with renters and figure out how to get a cleaner in there so you guys don't tear each other apart, blaming somebody else for their pizza dishes from the night before. I
Exactly.
love that. That right there is the hot moment of this interview, that you figured out to bring a cleaner in every other week. That's super smart, Dane.
Thank you. Yeah, it's helped tremendously. It's one of the biggest issues with living with roommates is those arguments late at night or early in the mornings.
Yep. Now, you used some of your savings to get into this. So I'm curious what do you picture as the next step in your, obviously 30 by 30? Are you going to just keep the W-2 and just keep setting money aside for the next down payment? Is that kind of how you're picturing going on to grab the next one? What do you think?
I'm not entirely sure how that is going to be coming about here in the next year or so. This
Yeah.
mortgage reporting on my credit report throws off the debt to income ratio a little bit, which isn't quite as fond of the traditional lender. So I'm definitely going to have to get more creative here coming up in the next year with how I finance properties with private equity, seller financing, lease options. That's definitely how I'm going to have to start structuring deals to try to make everything happen versus going the route that I had previously gone.
Right. But you're right. You have gone through this first property, you've broken the sled out of the ice, and you now know how to process the deal and get it to pencil. So you can do that for the next one, right?
Exactly. Yep. I know all the numbers. I know the mistakes that I made in trying to figure out how much things cost in terms of materials or labor for myself or industry professionals, as well as time too. How long it takes to close on a property, how long I can judge for when I can get rooms or units rented, that sort of thing.
Yeah. Why don't you leave us with that? Because everybody sees your win, which is awesome. And obviously, you already shared. It wasn't like you got the first. You didn't knock on the first door or call the first call or send the first piece of mail and get a deal. Like you struggled for over a year before you got this first one, which people they don't see you in the trenches doing that. But when it comes to those learning lessons, what's the biggest one that sticks out to you? You just kind of glossed over a bunch right there, but um, what was the mistake or the speed bump that you hit that you learned from in that?
The biggest mistake and speed bump that I hit was my self doubt in the beginning because that took up time and you can't get time back. You can get money back, you can create and generate more wealth, but time is not something that's going to be reoccurring in our lives at this point. So The biggest thing for me was self-doubt and thinking that I wasn't in a position to do it versus seeing other people do it around me and seeing those on YouTube and such do a house hack at the same or similar age and know that if they can
Yeah,
do it, I can do it. And if they can do it, I can do it even better.
absolutely.
So it's just seeing those case studies and learning from them, seeing their mistakes and trying your best to avoid them and
Yep.
just taking that dive in and get after it.
I love that. I love that. Yep. The fear of the unknown is very powerful in our human brains, and it does prevent us from, like you say, diving into water where you can't necessarily see what's at the bottom. But you took a lot
Mhm.
of steps to mitigate the risks. You knew your numbers, you knew your math, knew how to make it work. And sounds like you had fallback with friends and family. Not everybody has that, so that's a huge blessing that you took advantage of, and now you're moving forward. So this was a very calculated risk that you took, and in this case, one that made sense.
Certainly. Yep. Couldn't agree more.
Love it. Well, now you've joined the ranks of those on the internet who are teaching through sharing their documented journeys of investing. So we'll make sure you got a copy of this to share with your friends, because I think there's probably a 21-year-old out there who's graduating university who's trying to figure this stuff out for themselves. And if you can do it, they can do it, don't you think?
Oh, certainly. If I can do it, anyone can, especially with having that thing between your ears called your brain. It's a powerful tool and it's something that anyone can utilize.
It's good. All right, Dane. So we're gonna have you on before you turn 30, and let's see how far you got by, let's say, next year. I'm gonna challenge you to come on back next year, and let's see how far you got.
That sounds like a plan to me. Thanks again, Nate, for having me on. It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely. We'll see you on the next one.
See ya.
Boom. Dane. That's awesome. I love this story. Really love this story. Let me get these. Our face is a little wider
That was
here. There we
exciting.
go.